Hello all and welcome back to my channel, Drunk Crafts with Paige. I am Paige and I am sporting my brand new neon pink hair that my sister and I decided to dye this past weekend. I'm also continuing to drink through the wedding cider, slowly making my way through the pile that we have. As some of you might know, I recently started dipping my toes into the world that is embroidery and cross-stitching. We created with a DIY kit this little cat behind us, and we have also embroidered some canvases as well as a t-shirt. But my new favorite thing is embroidering not explicit sayings, maybe sassy is the better word. Embroidering sassy sayings onto really nice decorative hoops. And I created this one off camera. It just says, "All day, all shit." It is a Bo Burnham quote, and it just has this gorgeous sunflower right in the center. And so I thought it would be fun to create one of these with you guys. Using a 10-inch hoop, we are going to be embroidering a funny quote that I have in mind, as well as using my new knowledge of some different stitching techniques and creating some other flowers. So if you guys are interested in learning how to embroider some easy flowers, please continue watching. Here is my hoop, and I have already gone and sort of drawn on my pattern, my design. I did skip a couple of steps of things that we have gone over before. I put the cloth in the hoop already. I pressed the big hoop over the tiny hoop and tightened it. Made sure all my dots were centered, and like I said, I drew on my pattern. And I have 3 strands of green embroidery thread, all nice and knotted. It's knotted on this side, and I've got it ready to start going. Now remember, when we did the cat embroidery piece, we learned that embroidery thread actually kind of comes apart into 6 separate, very thin strands. And the more strands you decide to pull apart and use when you're stitching, the thicker your stitch will become. So this allows you to do some really fine detail work if you want to only use 1 strand of the embroidery thread, but that's totally up to you and your design and how detailed you want to go. So first, I drew some stems down on here. I actually prefer to do my stems first, so then I can kind of build my flowers around where the stems are. So this new stitch that I just learned, I decided we'll back stitch for the words, but for the stems, we are going to split stitch, which is quite similar. I came up right here. I'm going to go a little ways out, pull my thread through, and when I come back up again, it's a split stitch because when I come back up, I'm going to come up where I already have some thread. And then go a little bit farther out. So once again, when I come up, I'm going to come up through the middle of where we have some string, pull it through, and then go a little further out. Basically, I am just going to continue doing this stitch for all of my stems. That's what we're going to be using for our stems. All of my flower stems are done, and now I'm going to move on to the leaves. So this stitch that I'm going to try to do is a fishbone stitch, and I came up right at the very tip of the leaf. I'm going to go down maybe halfway. And now what I'm going to start doing here is popping up on either side, and we're going to slowly add to the middle and gradually work our way down until we have our whole leaf. So I am going to, as I said, I'm going to pop up right next to my middle, and then I'm going to go down as close as I can to that center point. Now the tighter you make these stitches, like the closer together, your point of coming up and your point of going back down, the closer they are, the tighter your fishbone stitch is going to be. I'm just going to continue down this side and continue down this side until we've made it all the way to the end. Now that I am at the end of my fishbone stitch, I made sure the very bottom of my leaf attached to the stem. And I also like, this is a personal preference, I like to come up right at the very top again, the very tip of my leaf, and I run all the way down to the bottom, and then you've kind of got a nice little subtle stem running right down the middle. And if you'd like, you could use a totally different color to add that touch. So I'm going to go ahead and fishbone to all of my other leaves before we move on. All of our stems and our leaves are done, which means we are going to move on to the flowers. So the first stitch we're going to work on is a type of loop stitch. This stem right here is going to be kind of like a lilac looking flower. So I'm going to start by coming up right here. You're going to go back in wherever you would like the base of your petal to be. So I'm going to go relatively close to where I came in. You can decide how big you would like your actual petal to be, but you would come up where you want your petal to stop, and see, that's going to make a loop. And you're gonna end up coming down the same hole and it's gonna keep that loop in place. So there's one of them. I'm gonna go and do the other side. So I'm gonna come up in the same spot, but I want it to loop around this way. So I think I'm gonna make my petal about here. And I'd like it to stop right around here. And to keep it in place, I'm gonna go right back through the same hole. And there is our second loop. So I'm going to speed through doing the same thing to both sides on this stem, and I'd like this flower to be the same kind of thing as well. My two little lilac-y plants are done. I did realize as I was making them, be careful not to tighten your string too tight. In a couple of spaces, my petals ended up looking a little bit more pointy and not as smooth like petals. So just try to keep it nice and loose, and I think your petals will turn out better. The last simple stitch we are going to go over is called the French knot, and we're going to do that on a couple of these stems. And now this effect kind of just gives you a lot of knots. And it's really great for flowers that might be kind of puffy, or for the inside, the middle portion of flowers. I have 3 strands of yellow thread that I have already brought up. And once you've got your string pulled through, kind of hold it tight to one direction, and you're going to take your needle and you're going to loop your thread over once, twice, and I'm actually going to go 3 times because the number of times that you loop around the needle means your knot is going to turn out bigger. And I'm going to bring it down through the same hole, or as close to it as I can. And as I pull the needle through, continue holding on to your string. Allows it to not get tangled up and to turn into a very nice knot. Now when you're holding your string like that, make sure that it is taut, but not too taut. If you're pulling it too tightly, then you're going to end up with a very, very tiny knot, which is not what you want. So once again, I'm bringing my needle up and through. I'm going to pull it to one side, twist it 1, 2, 3 times, put it down the same hole, and continuing to hold my string and gently pull it through. So now we've got 2 little knots. And for this flower, I'm just going to kind of continue this. It's supposed to just kind of look big and fluffy and puffy, and that's why I'm going to make up the whole flower with basically a bunch of knots. So this flower and this flower over here, we're just going to continue knotting and doing French knots over and over until I feel like it is sufficiently filled in. All of my poofy flowers are finished, and so now I'm just going to use kind of a variation of different techniques to create some more flowers on all of my remaining stems. Our embroidery project is finished, and I think I've mentioned it in some of our other embroidery videos before, but I find they take forever, especially the cat one that we did that was a little bit more detailed, and this one is not nearly as detailed as that. They still took quite a bit of time, at least longer than our paintings usually do. I highly recommend looking up realistic or very detailed embroidery projects. They're mind-blowing and crazy beautiful. But anyway, ours is done, so we are going to take a close look at it. The last stitch that I taught you guys was a French knot, and so I use that with a combination of various other stitches to finish up this project. So here is our final hoop. Woo! I love the puffy French knot flowers. I really do. And I did actually go and I kind of finished off the back by tying my extra fabric together. There are various ways that you could put cloth over the back. Maybe we'll go over that a different time, but I did not have any spare fabric at hand to make it look very nice and presentable. Either way, I love the way that this turned out with all of our cute little flowers across the bottom and then our random kind of quirky saying up towards the top. So here are some up-close shots of our embroidery piece. Thank you guys so much for watching my video. I hope you guys enjoyed this embroidery project, and if you guys have any fun, quirky, even explicit quotes that you think would be funny to put on a nice embroidery hoop, please put them in the comment section below. I would love to hear them. And if you haven't already, feel free to hit that subscribe button and check me out on social media. My links are in the description box below. I'll see you guys all for the next video. Cheers!